Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me on Carroll PMC's video interview series. I'm excited to have you with me today to discuss another's journey through medicine. And today, I have a great guest for you all, Trevor Eichmann. Trevor is a Carroll College graduate with a major in biology and two minors, one in chemistry and one in philosophy. Trevor was awarded a full tuition scholarship through the United States Navy's Health Professions Scholarship Program. In addition to speaking to us about the HPSP Scholarship, a method of funding medical school that is available to all medical school applicants, Trevor is here to discuss what is perhaps one of our greatest fears. Knowing that we are meant to be doctors, feeling like the career path is almost inevitable for us. Working hard through our undergraduate careers, surpassing the MCAT, finishing the grueling application process, and then being rejected from medical school. Trevor has kindly offered to retell his journey after rejection, and what steps he has and is currently taking to recover and prosper on. It is a story of emotion, perseverance, and immense courage in the face of adversity, and is something I believe all of us need to hear. So let's jump right in and say hello to Trevor. Trevor, welcome to Carroll PMC's video interview series, the first video interview series of 2021. It's great to have you here with us.
It's good to be here.
When did you realize you wanted to be a physician?
I realized I wanted to be a physician probably in high school, I think. I'm not sure at what point, but I knew that medicine was a passion of mine for a long time, since I was a kid especially. I grew up in Bozeman, and I was in a Cub Scout and Boy Scout group, and we did lots of field trips and kind of experiences to kind of see what we wanted to do for our lives. And my, start for medicine was a field trip to Bozeman Deaconess Hospital, where I watched an orthopedic surgeon give surgery to a mannequin. And I thought it was just really cool that this surgeon could take apart a, fake person and figure out the problem and fix them up. And I thought this was amazing and would be a really interesting career. And that started my passion for medicine. And I decided on a physician over like a nurse or a PA or kind of a hospitalist or anything other by hearing my mom's stories of her job. She's a RN that works in the surgery department, and I think she's rotated through the other departments as well. But she always came home telling me of like these great surgeons that were either so nice to her, or how she was thankful for these surgeons for leading them through a really tough case in the emergency room or a trauma that came into the operating room. And it just kind of made me realize that I wanted to be that leader who kind of just pulled all the other health providers together and either saved a life or made a meaningful change for a patient that allowed them to return to their normal routine.
I knew I would do that. That's great. That's great insight into just kind of differentiating between doctors and nurses. That's one of the biggest ones, is that in the whole process of deciding whether or not to go into medicine and go to medical school, about deciding whether or not to do so, go in as a doctor, or like versus being a PA or versus being a nurse or any career like that. And yeah, oftentimes it's that nurse one that's kind of difficult, because at least nowadays, especially because of EMR and everything, doctors usually aren't spending as much time with the patients. It's oftentimes a lot of the nurses or the techs that spend most of the time with the patients. So it has to be more than just an orientation to wanting to help people. But on the flip side too, it can't just be a infatuation with the sciences as well. And I think the only way to answer or to explain, whether or not or why doctor versus nurse or why doctor versus PA is those direct experiences, is being able to account, seeing it, experiencing it for yourself, and seeing, and it sounds like it's something you've experienced with your mother then, seeing for yourself that, you know what, I've seen this, I've had this experience, that is why I want to go and be a physician, not a nurse,
Right.
not a PA, etc. That's great insight. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you were in Boy Scouts too, which I forgot about that. And so what sort of experiences do you think maybe fostered in Boy Scouts. A lot of people join that for the adventures of the outdoors, and I certainly found a passion for exploring and challenging myself, exploring the unknown and challenging myself through going out in nature in a couple of weeks, because I was a Boy Scout as well. Were there any experiences that you might be able to reflect on that encouraged you to go towards a career that is quite difficult relative to every other career that you could pursue?
From Boy Scouts specifically?
Yeah, any experiences, anything like that?
Oh man, that's going back.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, that field trip to the hospital was kind of a monumental one, but especially in Boy Scouts, there was a hard focus on, I guess, work ethic and kind of just always being there in the community, I want to say. There was a large kind of push to be just a servant to the community, volunteer, and kind of perform these selfless acts for others and appreciate those on your level without having to ask for any sort of, I guess, payment or praise for it. And it was through a lot of these experiences that just the act of serving others has been it just feels good for me, I guess. And there's sort of an obligation and a call now from being a Boy Scout to continue this throughout my life and in my career, whether I end up actually being a physician or not.
Right. There's I forgot what part of it, but isn't it like to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, morally straight? It's one part of that. It's something like that. That's still up there somewhere. But perfectly said. So getting into Carroll now, because you are a Carroll grad, do you feel like any skills or experiences you picked up at Carroll have helped you get to where you are now, and are things that you'll believe will help you in the medical field as well?
Yes. I mean, the Carroll curriculum, it challenges you a lot. I think that not taking, I would say an easy class load is probably a good decision. Challenge yourself with classes, add those extra 3 credits, because Carroll or medical school is not going to be a breeze. I have a lot of friends that are in it right now, and they said it's a challenge. It's kind of, they'll explain to you in the interviews when you meet or go to the meet and greets for medical schools. They'll say it's like a fire hose of information. So Carroll did a fair amount of preparation for that by assigning just the coursework and then the tests every 3 weeks. It helps you prepare you as a student, but on top of that, especially for the MCAT, the Carroll curriculum prepares you very well for that. I know, during my time, Dr. Gretsch, he was very, how do I say this? He thought ahead on kind of trying to push students on what classes to take if they want to go to medical school, because the classes offered at Carroll for a pre-med student are kind of centered around the topics and the questions that will be asked on the MCAT. So the pre-med students will do well on the MCAT, and then they know what they need to know to get into medical school. That's what the Carroll pre-med is centered for, and it prepares you very well, I think. And other than that, my minors, I took philosophy and chemistry, and those are just other challenges as well that kind of help you branch out of your major a little bit. Chemistry is really related to biology, but philosophy, it's another thought process, another subject to challenge your brain. And by branching out I think it really helped my critical thinking, especially.
Yeah, that lower art really grows into a holistic learner. And I would have to agree for sure about what you said about just the curriculum of some of the science classes, tailoring towards some MCAT specific content. I don't think it does it perfectly, which is why when I had professors that weren't like Dr. Gretsch, or even with Dr. Gretsch, I was bringing my biology, my chemistry, my physics professors MCAT questions and requesting them to maybe work through them with me, or requesting additional time in class tailored to those specific concepts. And it's something that I encourage anyone who's listening to this who is a Carroll student currently prepping for the MCAT, or in the future planning on taking the MCAT, to for sure bring this up to your professors. And that first meeting that I encourage everybody to have with professors and office hours, whether it's on Zoom, in person, whatever, tell your goals, tell your aspirations. Tell your journey in and of itself in a nutshell. Don't be there all day doing that.
Yeah.
And just describe, I mean, hey, I want to take the MCAT. I want to do really good on this. You have a PhD in this area. You've spent a lot of time here. Can you help me work through this? And I'm pretty sure, like, I would be confident enough to say 10 out of 10 professors would be willing to sit with you and go through it and truly help you out on that process.
Yeah,
Something that's happened with
absolutely.
me, and yeah, it sounds like it's something that's happened with you, Trevor.
Yeah.
So we're talking about it already a bunch. We might as well just get right into it. So the MCAT and the application process, I guess.
Yes.
What strategies and tips would you recommend to Carroll students who are preparing to take the MCAT in 2021?
For the MCAT specifically, I mean, Carroll prepares you well, but by no means perfect because the amount of information on that test is extraordinarily huge. So for the MCAT specifically, invest in extra classes, extra resources to help you prepare. I mean, I went on Amazon and I remember it's like an MCAT prep package where you get online tests, online classes, textbooks to read through and do sample problems and homework. And I mean, at the minimum, I would start with those. But you can do actual classes online where you attend with other pre-med students who are taking or plan to take the MCAT. I know those have been really helpful for people, but definitely look for resources, talk to people who have taken the MCAT, see what works for them, what doesn't. But really, yeah, the resources are necessary. And I would say when it came to practice tests as well, I mean, I remember spending $50 a test when trying to prepare, and use these tests to your benefit. Don't pause them, walk away, and come back. Like I remember practicing, I'd sit down for 8 hours straight in front of this laptop and take a test. And I can't tell you how much that helped. Like the test itself is not the information, it's the exhaustion that comes with it. And you got to have that test stamina to make it through it without having your head get kind of that throbbing tiredness. Yeah, sorry if you have something to say.
No, I completely agree with you. The endurance, like as an endurance athlete myself, I liken the MCAT to pretty much how I prepped for a race. It was a lot of going through those practice tests, not only to re-cement just the content and the specific structure of it, but also just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to space out like getting some calories in every once in a while, or dosing caffeine, or like getting up to stretch and to move and to breathe. Those are like often overlooked and simple, but very important aspects of the test. And I'm glad you touched on that. I was wondering if you happen to know what prep sources you use specifically, because I always like to name drop a few companies just for the benefit of the Carroll Premed.
Yep. So my education ones with textbooks and tests, I primarily did Khan Academy, Kaplan. And then I used Khan Academy videos, I think on like YouTube and their websites to touch on specific topics that were kind of hard for me. And then in relation to that, I went to professors at Carroll, especially with physics, and got some direct help with that. And then I believe it's the MCAT site, like AAMC maybe. They offer, I think, 3 or 4 tests and I bought those as well. And then I know if you dig deeper, you can find some more tests or like test bundles too from Khan Academy and Kaplan.
Yeah, definitely. Khan Academy currently is sort of in the waters at this point because they are discontinuing some free resources, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
For the coming year. They're going to begin to charge for it, I believe, which is unfortunate because especially for the psychology and sociology section, their videos are pretty much in tandem with the AAMC outline. And if there's any part of the AAMC outline that you guys should be looking at in particular, and like really making sure you understand it all, because I mean, like in just as a sidestep, in the physics section, there's like something on there, like, or maybe the chemistry, I'm not too familiar with physics, but like calorimetry or something is like on there. There are a lot, that's broad, Whereas like in psychology, it's minute down to specific terms and specific details. So those videos are in tandem with those videos. That's why they're very helpful. However, they may be being discontinued. I don't know the specific date. I thought it was through the last testing cycle, but I'm not sure if they're still there or anymore. But there are tons of resources out there. You name dropped a really good one, Trevor. As far as like Khan Academy, Kaplan, and all those go, there's exam crackers. There's so many different ones that you could use. You just got to kind of see what's right for you guys. And how long did you prep for the MCAT, Trevor?
See, I took the MCAT in May of I think 2019, but I started studying for it. It's September, October of 2018, so almost a whole year of preparation. And I took online courses and I mean everything I named, along with going to Carroll and attending classes. So
what did like a typical week of study look for you as far as structuring when you were gonna study? Or did you do it in like block sections where like psych for like a month or so and then switch over?
oh, let's see. I know I didn't do blocks. I kind of did all the subjects intertwined to make it kind of seem fresh in my mind. But I remember what I tried to do is I tried to do a subject from each category or each, I guess, topic on the test every week. And so with these textbooks I got, I mean, they were like 40 or 50 something chapters in them. So a typical week, I'd do my classes. Those would be my primary concern. I'd give all my effort towards. And then instead of like playing video games or going on a hike or hanging out with friends, I'd be like, sorry, no, I'm going to sit down and do a chapter, and I'd read the chapter, take notes, do the homework, and then study for the quiz using my notes and do the quiz. And so it was, usually 4 chapters a week.
That is a ton of content, but necessary. And I like how you say at the end of it that you applied it with a quiz, because really it's the same mantra they use in medical school: see one, do one, teach one. You see it all throughout the week. You do it as yourself on a quiz, and then you teach it to someone else or yourself in reflection on that quiz or on that test or on that practice exam. But every strategy, every schedule is different and unique to everyone. So I always like asking anyone about what specifically they used, because it helps to give people just some insight into how to structure their own. And then there was the next beast, which was the application process. And I'd like to, we'll get into the scholarship portion of it soon, but as far as the general application process, any tips, strategies, experiences, nightmares that you'd wish to share with us?
Nightmares. Oh, well, I would say don't wait until the last minute to start writing. I don't know who the advisor is at Carroll anymore, but for me it was Dr. Gretsch for Premed, and he recommended you start on your 15 most meaningful experiences in the fall of the year you're going to apply. And I strongly recommend this because the experiences themselves are not hard. They're really short pieces, fairly easy to write, get them concise and neat. But get those out of the way for opening up the spring when you write your personal statement, because that is the most important essay you will ever write. And it is probably the only piece or the main focus of your interviews when coming to medical school. They always ask about it. And giving you that 4 to 6 months in the spring to devote all your time and energy to writing just that one essay is necessary. And I don't know, I guess there's in the later question where you asked about my past application and weaknesses, but so I won't get into it. But yeah, spend a lot of time on the personal statement in that one essay and have it ready for when the application opens come May.
That's some great advice about the experiences. It'll come up as, so for people listening, this is something you, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, whatever, you need to know. It's the application, how it works is that it's a variety of different information you have to enter. There are these 15 slots for activities, for clinical experiences, non-clinical experiences, whatever activities. And you have a certain character or word amount to inputting, like a paragraph or something in there for each activity, along with the general information, the hours you've spent on it, and the dates you worked on it. Those paragraphs a lot of sources, and I strongly support, at least, like, and a lot of the advisors at Carroll have supported this as well, are for stories and experiences about those activities. Like, they want to know the stories and experiences. That's something that Trevor said that's great. Like, you can work on that now. You can begin to journal about that now. That way it makes it so much easier then, because I unfortunately didn't prep as well when I applied, so I had to spend a lot of time reviewing. Thankfully I journaled, but reviewing and structuring it and delivering it in a way that flows like a nice story. And that is most certainly something you could begin working on. The personal statement too. I've known people who've spent more than a year on the personal statement. I spent around 3 to 4 months, but they were quite dedicated every day, 3 to 4 months. It was quite a while. I don't know, Trevor, how long did you spend on the personal statement?
My first one was 6 months, and my second one, I will say, was only a month and a half, but it was a month and a half of some serious stress. So
Definitely, yeah. So great advice as far as that goes. And yeah, we're touching on a lot of great stuff, but one thing in particular that makes you stand out a little bit is that you decided to apply to medical school via the HPSP program through the United States Navy. HPSP is Health Profession Scholarship Program. Explain your motivations and reasoning that inspired you to make that decision.
yeah, right. So I didn't have any familial support going through Carroll, so I paid my way. And considering medical school, I mean, it's going to be $500,000 to go. So that's either going to be in debt or paid for. And for me, I thought, like, I'd much rather have it paid for, and having my parents go into the military, my brother who's a Marine, I felt some of, I guess, a familial obligation to go into the military at some point. And I thought, if the military is going to pay for my medical education, this would be a perfect opportunity to take both these ideas and combine them. And I chose Navy specifically because my brother is a Marine, like I said, and the Marines don't have their own medical program. So they rely on the Navy and their corpsmen to take care of them and go through all their medical examinations and traumas. So I chose that, and I think it would be a great way for me to serve others by kind of protecting and healing their loved ones who put their lives out on the line. So yeah, that's really it.
Yeah, there's almost no greater honor than serving the people who protect and defend our country, as well as their loved ones, to give them the reassurance that they're being taken care of while they're out fighting and risking their lives for the nation. And so that was one of the motivations that brought me into applying via the same scholarship program this cycle. I'm doing the same thing that you were doing. That's actually how we first began to talk, through
Yep.
email and through other stuff as well. And so, yeah, it's a great program. I was wondering if you could just describe it a little bit more in detail, because immediately, I know when I first heard about it, immediately I began to, okay, Navy, military equals service. What is the trade-off? What are you doing in place of getting that scholarship? And can you explain a little bit more of that scholarship as well?
Yeah. So after the application process, you get accepted, and upon entering medical school, you sign a contract with the Navy, and this contract, what it basically says is what you owe them and the benefits that you get in return. And what they're going to do for you is pay for all your school expenses for 4 years. So that includes books, school supplies, the tuition itself, anything and everything. And on top of that, you get about a $2,300 monthly stipend that should be put towards your food and rent and living expenses. Then during that 4-year period, while you're in medical school, you go to officer training, which is essentially boot camp for officers. And you kind of get to learn the ins and outs of being in the Navy and how to, I guess, carry yourself through the military. And I think you would do that either in your first or second summer while in medical school. But during your education itself, they, for the most part, leave you alone. They're paying for you to get that education, so they want you to do well, and they just kind of push you out there and leave you alone. But every year you have to, I guess, contact, I'm not sure if it's the recruiter, but it's whoever is your direct supervisor, and you have to give them an update on your education, how you're doing, and kind of stay in contact. And I'm not really sure what else goes into that because I'm not there yet, but stay in contact with them throughout the medical school period. And then when it comes time to graduate, I know you have to apply for residency, or at least most medical students do. And with the Navy, you kind of get a choice, and you can either apply for a civilian residency, or you can apply for the Navy residency and go active duty. And this is where the Navy kind of gets their return on their investment. And you go, for every year that they pay for you, you owe 1 year in return of active duty. So with residency, you can choose to either stay civilian and get your residency that way, but the Navy doesn't support you through that. You still owe them the 4 years after your civilian residency, which you will do after you receive your license and move on. Or you can do your active duty through residency, where the Navy will put you either in a hospital, on a hospital ship, in a fleet, or in a submarine, and you will carry out your 4 years in residency by serving as an active duty corpsman for the Navy. And after that, after your 4 years are served, you have the option to stay with the Navy, get your full-time service, or you can get out and go back to the civilian world of medicine and enjoy being a doctor.
Yeah, definitely. Well said. That's a good process because it's a whole journey throughout the whole thing. It's through medical school, through residency, and then yes, like you said, you have the option then to defer to civilian or to continue military service as well. I'm wondering if you could elaborate more in particular on the active duty side of things, because the way that I understand it is that when you get through medical school, they leave you untouched. It's time for the residency. You have the choice between civilian or military, or you can apply to civilian. I think if you get accepted to a military, you usually go to the military residency instead of the civilian. I think it might depend on specialty as well. But there's also the option to then begin active duty service before that. So I was wondering if you could differentiate between the active duty service and the residency part of the process.
Okay. So the residency, that's just more or less your own education for your practice and specialty that you want to get into. So depending on whether that, I think, cooperates with what the Navy wants, you can fulfill that requirement. But the active duty aspect of the Navy is they want you to serve 4 years of active duty where you are essentially performing medicine for them in some form or manner. So with the residency portion, I think you're going to be working as a physician. But if you don't do residency with your active duty, I'm not really quite sure how that would be. I haven't exactly read the whole list and contract in a little while, but I think they'd make use of you somehow with your education without just, I guess, putting you out on the front lines.
Yeah. Yes, most definitely. And a couple things that I'll add in just from what I've heard from speaking with the recruiter that we've shared is a few more details about the process. So when you are at that point, you can choose to begin your residency or beef up your resume in a sense. That's one benefit of then going and serving immediately. You can serve up to 2 years of active duty as a CMO, a chief medical officer, prior to entering residency, or you can go straight into residency. Sometimes it's a great way to boost your resume. You have years of service as a chief medical officer, which can be done in a variety of different places and a variety of different things. You could work at a VA, you could work at a base, you could work on a ship if we're talking about the Navy. There's even humanitarian aid that the Navy does as well, where there's opportunities to do that as well. As a CMO, you could be an undersea dive medic. You could go into you could be a flight surgeon, which isn't as cool as it sounds. And then
No.
you can do a bunch of different things with it. And then you can go into residency. Another thing is that as far as I understand it, it is every year of residency you have, with the exception of family med and emergency medicine, they can be 3 or 4 year residencies. You're serving 4 years at a minimum.
Mm-hmm.
So for those, you serve 4 years. But if you want to go into neurology or be a neurosurgeon or orthopedics or something, I don't know, or maybe being an oncologist. At least as far as I understand the neurosurgery side of things, it's a 7-year residency. That's 7 years of active duty. And for those residencies and those specialties in particular, staying in for those additional more years until receiving a check for the rest of your life may be better because, hey, your residency years count towards that check for the rest of your life. So if you're in your residency, your military residency for 7 years, you serve active duty for 7 more years, you're at 14 years of service. Maybe it's better than stay in for a little bit while longer and not defer to civilian to get that check. But regardless, what you said and what I'd like to emphasize is that at the end of your service, you have the option to defer to civilian or stay in the military. You can get out. It's only binding until you're done with your service that you've signed for. But there is an option to get out. And it's a good, I don't know, I think it's an interesting way to complement your medicine. Now, if you go into it as looking for a specialty as a pediatrician, there might not be that many spots.
Yeah.
Or like a geriatrician or something, or I don't know, maybe a geriatrician's more prominent, but like a pediatrician or some really weird specialty, there might not be as many spots or as many availabilities for that. But for me, like interested in emergency medicine, there's a lot of spots for like family med, for oncology, for orthopedics, there's spots available. And lastly, the same competitiveness of the civilian world as far as specialty spots goes, I think it translates also into the military as well. Relative, it's sort of alike, but obviously some of the higher up specialties, the orthopedic surgeon specialties, stuff like that, it's kind of competitive. Still hard to get into, but an interesting way to fund medical school.
Yes.
You have nothing else to add to that. I was wondering if you could speak to some of the motivations that got you into it, motivations that shouldn't get you into that scholarship. And when you explained what got you into it, you said nothing about the financial aspect of it. That was only when I asked you to elaborate on it. Why shouldn't you get into this purely to fund medical school?
I mean, the money is not that great. I will tell you that right now. When you look at it, the $2,300 a month and paying for medical school, it sounds nice, but the pay in the military you're going to get, it's not going to be an extreme amount that's going to make up for, I guess, the years of service, if that's what you're thinking. And the military will get its money's worth out of you. And when you sign that contract, the money might be nice, but that 4 years of active duty where you have to return that service, the military essentially owns you, and whether or not you want to go and do something is out of the question. I mean, where there's a spot open, where they want to put you is where you're going to go. And I guess, pre-med students or anyone who's interested in this to understand that before they, carry out this process and go down this path. It's a helpful way to pay for medical school, helpful to get through it without the debt and the financial stress. But there are, not consequences, but there's obligations that you have to fulfill for that financial help.
Yeah, so well said. And it's something that I'd really be looking into a lot prior to making the decision. Part of the reason why I began speaking to Trevor was because I was a year out from applying, and I saw this as an opportunity. My grandfather was served in the Navy. However, there's no other extensive background in military in my family. I always had a respect for the military, and I thank Boy Scouts for that. But it was something I was interested in. I contacted Trevor. I contacted the recruiter. There was something at MSU, a pre-med event, where he was there actually, and spoke to him directly for many hours. And it was something that I did a lot of research in, and that was what fueled my interest into it. And you guys heard what fueled Trevor's interest into it. Nothing about the money. That's a good benefit of it, but you got to be into it more than the money. It's exactly what all the physicians that's been on this video series have said about going into medicine too. It can't be about the money. That's not going to last. And speaking about preparing for and applying for the HPSP program, for those of you that don't know, you pretty much apply around the same time that you're applying for medical school. However, usually you won't be done with the HPSP application by the time you're done with the medical school application, because it can be kind of difficult. Explain just the process of applying to the HPSP program, as well as maybe some of the struggles that you've encountered along the way while simultaneously applying for medical school.
Yeah. So, I mean, Andrew, you started by talking to a recruiter, and that's initially the first step you have to take. And the HPSP scholarship, you can do any branch with it too. I want to add that in. It doesn't just have to be the Navy. You can do the Army or the Air Force, or I think Army National Guard too. But yeah, start with a recruiter, and then that recruiter, they will ask you some questions, get to know your GPA, your MCAT, or whether or not you've taken it, and kind of get a feel for who you are as an applicant. Because, I mean, obviously they want to recruit you, but there's got to be potential for you as a medical school student. So once you talk to the recruiter, they'll get you an application, and you're going to go through that application and fill it out. It's going to be relatively similar to the medical school one. They want to know your motivations for the Navy, your motivations for medicine, and you got to explain yourself to them. And along with that, you got to show them not only how good of a student you are, but an athlete as well, and how determined you are to, I guess, rise in the ranks of the military. Because it's an obligation that you got to fulfill. So you got to work out, show them. Like, I remember I have a spreadsheet that I had to make to explain to Chief McDonough and the board, like what I did on a daily basis for a workout, how far I ran, because those are all requirements you got to fulfill. So there's a whole application process. And once that application gets accepted, you got to do a background check. And the background check, I would say, was the biggest hurdle for me. I had a lot of challenges with that, both with lots of reasons, but I was fighting fire during that background check period. So and the background check is extensive, and they want to know everything from your entire life, almost to when you were born. So it takes a lot of time to do it. And I would recommend trying to stay on top of that if you do decide to pursue this. And yeah, I would say the only hurdle I had with that and throughout the whole application process was when it says cohabitant, it means that like your friend that you are living with to help pay rent, you are not in a relationship together. And I messed that up, and I was almost rejected because of that. And yeah, it was a mess. It was a mess. Yeah, that was my only real hurdle. My recruiter was a little bit worried when he called me, and was like, didn't explain myself well with that, but got that fixed. And then after you do the background check, you will go spend a day at MEPS. So depending on the state you live in, is kind of determinant of where you will go for it. But I went to Butte, Montana, and at this appointment, they're going to do a very serious physical for you. They are going to do like blood pressure, blood draws. They're going to test you in and out just to see if you're well-rounded, solid human being physically. See if you can see, hear, pretty much everything. And it's an interesting day. I don't know if you've done it yet, Andrew, but
I have not yet.
It's fun. You'll love it. Yeah, don't be bashful is my advice in that, and don't be embarrassed. Just got to kind of suck it up and get through it. But the MEPS day is not bad. They take care of you. And don't be scared about the drill sergeants that are there. They'll yell at you, kind of make you feel a little down, but don't worry. It's their job. And after the MEPS day, your recruiter will set up 2 interviews for you from Navy doctors. I don't quite know the specifications or who interviews you and why, but you get 2 interviews, and in these interviews, these guys, what they want to know is your motivation for medicine, why the Navy. They essentially want you to explain yourself from your application. They read your application, and they just want to see if you can explain yourself in words. And it's sort of like a medical school interview, honestly, looking back on it. I mean, there's no panel. It's just a one-on-one. And mine were both over the phone, but they just, yeah, they want to know you and why Navy, more Navy than medicine. But these two guys are essentially the make or break it for you and the scholarship, because they present you to the board, their opinion of you, and whether or not you are going to make it as a physician and in the Navy. And after you interview, all of these resources go to the board and they review your application. And whether or not they accept you, whether or not they'll accept you or not, and you can go from there. But if they accept you, your recruiter will let you know, and the last step in the application is to get an acceptance letter. And that's currently where I'm at. And the scholarship is active, I think, for 2 years. And so I think I might answer a second question of yours. But yeah, the scholarship is active for 2 years once you're accepted. So if you're not accepted that first year that you apply to medical school and with the scholarship, it'll roll over into the second application process without any worry. You just got to tell your recruiter, I didn't get in, and can we roll it over to the next one? And hopefully I'll get an acceptance letter then, and you're good for it. If you don't get into medical school for those 2 cycles, then you got to go through the application process again and essentially start over. But once you're at the point I'm at, you just got to get that acceptance letter, and your recruiter will eventually text you, check in with you every month or so, kind of see how you're doing. And if you're still working out, if you got interviews, they'll give you a little motivational text. But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that is a process.
It is.
It is a very long process, and I think the moral of it, of just how to handle it, is something that you sort of alluded to. Is it's just embrace the suck, embrace the suck of the process. Because I can only speak to as far as I went, as I am currently, and I'm still in the process of the medical review. Because as an endurance athlete, you encounter a few stress fractures here and there. I've been fortunate to encounter 11 total stress fractures, so they want a lot of records on that stuff. So I'm in that process as far as MEPS goes, but it's grueling, it's long, but you just got to kind of work through it, because you could be like Trevor and you could be where he is, farther along the process, and getting that far in and of itself is a pretty good success. So congratulations, getting that far. And that's actually great to hear that it rolls over if you don't get medical schools, because it is a long process to have to repeat then. But that's good that at least that's they're still supportive of you, given the event that you get rejected and stuff like that. So thank you for that insight, though. That's very helpful, me especially, but also to all of you guys listening. I hope that helps. And I hope that helps, because it can be kind of complicated. But that first step, talk to a recruiter, that's probably where a lot of people want to begin. They know about the whole process. So transitioning now into the latter half of the interview, we're going into more of a different tone topic, and it has to do with just the thing that a lot of people are worried about with medical schools. One of people's worst fears is getting rejected to medical school. And the road to becoming a physician, starting off as being a medical student, all through medical school and residency and fellowships, is without a doubt one of the most challenging career paths one can take. Every year, around 50,000 people apply to medical schools, and 60% of those people get rejected. And aspiring doctors have challenges, and they face setbacks along the way that they must face and they must overcome. And you are no different. So describe what happened between the time you completed your secondary applications to medical school and when you found out that you were rejected from medical school. What worries and realizations did you begin to experience?
Oh man. So I finished my secondaries. So this was all last year in my senior year at Carroll. Finished my secondaries in August or September, I think. Then luckily for me, the interview invitations started coming in pretty routinely, and I had 5 interviews that I accepted and went to from October to January. And so as a pre-med applicant, I was like, woo, cheering, because 5 interviews is pretty good. And I felt good. Come probably January, I was feeling awesome. At that point, I was only rejected from one school, and it was Kansas. state. And that was like, it wasn't the biggest loss for me. I didn't feel that my chances getting into that school were great, but I had OHSU, University of Nevada, Reno, and North Dakota still. But come March, I was waitlisted for 3 schools, rejected from University of Nevada, Reno. And that's kind of, I guess, when I started to sink in a little bit. And I was like, I didn't want to start to reapply and rewrite my stuff yet because I was optimistic. I mean, as I think most pre-med students are and applicants, you feel confident in who you are as an applicant. But it's a part of the process, and many people do get rejected. And I want you all to know that it's part of this process that really sucks. It's expensive, and it's hard on like your own character, and it's a hard pill to swallow for sure. But it was probably around April. Yeah, April. It was that late for me when I realized I didn't make it. Should I reapply? Should I just do MD or DO? What I need to do? And at this point, this was during the whole COVID stuff. So there was those emotions as well as getting rejected from medical school. And it was hard. I mean, I honestly thought that I was maybe just a little cocky. I thought I was far too cocky as an applicant the first round through. And I think that was probably my weakness. But I reread my application just to myself, and I was I would say, disappointed in myself. I knew I could have done better, and it was hard to accept. But what I did from there is I contacted my advisor, and I took my whole application and I put it aside. I didn't trash it. It's important. Okay, don't trash it, because you got to learn from your mistakes. But I set it aside, and what I did was I contacted these schools that I was rejected from or waitlisted for, asked for follow-up appointments, and got some other resources from Carroll as well as family friends to help me quickly, I would say, rewrite my application and figure out what I did wrong and how to improve. And I mean, that was the end of April, so the application opens up in May. And I decided to rewrite all my meaningful experiences in personal statements in a month. I would not recommend it, especially with, Carroll going to classes and finals. You don't see the sun that much when you do that. But it's something that I had to do because I was disappointed in myself as an applicant. Very sad, honestly. And I rewrote everything in a much more positive way. I tried to reflect much better way on all my experiences. And on my personal statement, I think I improved greatly, even though I wrote it much quicker than my first one. I had a lot of help from a local author in Helena, and she helped me really kind of get the message I wanted. She was very critical on me, and I really appreciate her help. But I say accepted the loss very harshly and quickly. Probably about a week, I would say, sulking around, not too happy with myself. But then I turned it around and was like, this is kind of, I thought it was stupid. I was just like, this is stupid. This is not who I am. Like, I want to go into medicine. I want to go into the military, and I have great goals, and I'm going to get there. And so I kind of used my loss and failure as a motivation of sorts. And I learned from it, and I went to appointments, or I set up appointments with medical schools. They told me the weaknesses in my application or the notes of my interviewers, kind of explained to me what they liked, what they didn't, to some extent. They won't explain everything to you if you get a follow-up appointment, but they'll give you something to go off of. And then Dr. Gretsch read my application. He noted some things that were rather weaker than others, and my strengths as well. And I rewrote my application, got it all put back into the application online, and I waited. And I don't think I submitted it for probably a couple weeks. I submitted it later in June rather than right away this application process, just because, I don't know, I wasn't having second thoughts, but I was cautious. I wanted to make sure that this round was hopefully the round. And yeah, I submitted it end of June, changed a couple things, had a lot of people read it this time. I don't think I had enough help rereading my essays and editing them and kind of getting the right message for what I was trying to get across and whether or not the experiences were meaningful to the interviewers, not so much me. Like, they got to be important to the school that I was applying for. So, yeah, that was really it. I mean,
Sure.
if I have a word of advice for the pre-med students, if you don't get in, it's going to be hard. Like, it's a very, very hard time, very hard pill to swallow. It hurts, being told you're not good enough, but you gotta know that there's 26-year-olds, 30-year-olds who are applying next to you that have 8 more years of experience under the belt. That's 8 more years of things they have to explain after high school than you, and it's the nature of the process. So don't be hard on yourself. It's hard to get in your first year fresh out of college, and most people have to take a gap year anyway. I mean, the average age for an applicant or a first-year medical student is like 25 or 26. So you just got to move past it and just be motivated to do it again. And that's what I did. So
That is a great account of that. Yeah, the Kubler-Ross: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Being upset about any sort of failure in life, and especially something like that, is okay. That's one of the first biggest things that you can, as far as this goes. And it sounds like you did that really well. And reviewed your application over, checking for strengths and weaknesses of the process. And that's what every advisor, including especially Dr. Gretsch, who was formerly at Carroll, encouraged a lot. And it's something I think any pre-med advisor would encourage as well. And that's great to hear that you did that you reached out to medical schools.
yeah.
Can you explain a little bit of how you did that? Did you reach out to your admissions committees, or did you call the schools themselves? How specifically did you set up those feedback sessions?
So when you get an interview for a medical school, some of them, not all of them, when you go to the interview, they will offer a phone number or an email or a contact, essentially, that if you don't get in or if you're waitlisted, please contact us, set up an appointment, and we will explain to you how to improve. And they call them just follow-up appointments. And that's essentially what I did. I did them for 3 schools, and I only got 2 back because they only have a limited number of spots, and they give it to people who I would say need it, or whether or not they have a spot open, they will contact you if you're still a great applicant. But yeah, if you get an interview, most likely they will offer you a follow-up appointment if you don't get it. It's, I think, a part of the process and one of the resources for people to improve and reapply next year with the chances of getting in improved.
Okay, great. And along the process, once you accepted that you were rejected from medical schools and you went through these things, were there any particular aspects of your application that stood out to you? Because it sounds like you recorrected some things, and you applied then the next cycle. And so given that, what I begin to think is that it wasn't something as far as like some lacking shadowing or lacking specific like longer term activities. Maybe it was just ways in which you delivered your certain experiences and stuff. Was that those weaknesses in the application that stood out to you and the other people who reviewed your application?
Yes, I think you kind of hit it right on the nail there. Yeah, I had some of my experiences, if you read them in the wrong way, it seemed like I had a very negative outlook on a bunch of physicians that I shadowed or on experiences that I've had. And specifically, one of my follow-up appointments, one of the notes that one of my interviewers wrote was that I was essentially very cocky and I didn't know most of what it meant to be in medicine. And I needed to spend a lot more time volunteering and shadowing and learning and growing as a person before I would or should be considered to get into medical school. And I mean, rereading that, I knew right away what they meant. I didn't mean to come off as kind of that arrogant applicant, but I guess I did. And so what I did is I used the same experiences, the same ideas that I used to write, but I reflected on them in a much more positive way, like explaining how I learned from the situation and like, I guess, how it's prepared me to get into medical school, rather than being like, I don't want to be like that, or I promise I will never do that action. Like I don't know. It's hard for me to kind of talk about because
Of course, yeah. It's hard to describe that too, because during my application process too, describing these experiences, it's easier than you'd think to come off as if like you're like speaking about like how it is to be a doctor. And
yeah,
I came off like that multiple times throughout my application, and when I was planning on just having like one or two people read it over, they read it over and they say things like that. I was like, what, are you serious? And then read back, it's like, oh yeah, I was
yeah,
just saying that I knew how to be a physician.
yeah.
I suppose, I don't know, reaching out, I don't know what sources you reached out to specifically. I know at Carroll, there's the Writing Center, in which
Mm-hmm.
students as well as other faculty at the Writing Center that will help you through writing your personal statement and your experiences and stuff like that. Having non-medical and medical eyes look at the application is something I was also encouraged to have done, and it's something I did as well. Because something that a professor looks at versus just a layperson, somebody who doesn't have who isn't involved in serious academics, but is more oriented towards common sense aspect,
Mm-hmm.
just the qualities of people reading that, those are going to be really good insights because you want the application to at least be tailored towards everybody. And something that you mentioned a lot that I think is very important is in a way orienting the experiences to the reader and not to yourself, because
Yeah.
you are writing a story. It's a story. That's what the
Mm-hmm.
entire thing is. That is what a lot of the editing process that I went through, and it sounds like what you went through, is it's about captivating yourself and capturing yourself and delivering it in the form of a story, because you could have the most profound experience, and I'm sure you've had amazing, profound experiences that have oriented you towards being a doctor. But if the method of delivery isn't there, if you're not able to communicate that well, then it loses its power, it loses its grasp on the reviewer. And so, yeah, I think everything you've said about reviewing the process and then reformatting it to that it becomes a more flowing story, it has flow, it has direction. I mean, that's how you do it. And
Yep.
it's never something to feel at fault at, because it's just, you just don't know. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I could never be like an author or something. No way, in no way. But that's great insight into the process. And so you've kind of oriented yourself now to reapply and to fulfill your ultimate goal now. So is that where you stand currently right now? You're in the reapplication process?
Yes. So I applied again. And once everyone at this point, I mean, I'm in the waiting game essentially. I had 2 interviews this year so far, not 5, but I mean, all it takes is one. Actually, and it's just part of the waiting. I feel like as an applicant, I'm much better off this year than my last application process. I've done big changes in my life. I moved to Portland, and I've always lived in Montana, so that was a big change. I volunteer here, and in my work, I work with a lot of ex-cons and people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol. So it's an enlightening experience for me that I think I've grown from quite a bit. And yeah, I mean, once you're out of school, there's a lot of waiting, and time goes by much slower, I would say. But if you don't get in, a piece of advice would just be to challenge yourself. I mean, I moved to Portland during the COVID and the riot phase of this year, and it was a big change. Lots of anxiety came from it, but I think I've grown from it. I think it's helped me as an applicant. It's giving me more stories to tell for sure, and experiences that I think have helped me grow and prepare me for medical school. So yeah, challenge yourself. I mean, there's staying in your hometown and shadowing your childhood doctor. I mean, it might get you in, but medical schools want to see uniqueness in their applicants, I would say. So get out there, try some things.
Yeah, that's great. That's well said. And you did all this with a pandemic going on, with all these different sorts of events and fear and the whole process of accepting rejection and moving on from that. That is a significant accomplishment that cannot be overstated. And nobody likes to talk about rejection because oftentimes pre-medical students like us, we're very high achieving people. And
Mm-hmm.
you yourself most for sure fit this category of a high achieving person. And I think we all understand that talking about our failures can be very shaming and it can be very difficult as well. And so I cannot express the gratitude that I and the rest of Carroll PMC's officials and all the members and listeners to this have for you taking the time today to share your story and experiences dealing with this adversity. So we'd like to thank you for that greatly.
Oh,
And so now to wrap up things, as the Carroll Premed is listening to this and struggling on their own journey, whether or not they've been accepted or rejected or in the waiting game, the purgatory of the medical school application process, what final words of wisdom do you have for them?
I would say to all of you who are applying or will apply at some point, the effort that you put into this process is going to be reflected in the success that you see in the application process and whether you'll get an acceptance. It takes a lot of time, stress, and sleepless nights, I would say. But you got to put in a lot of time. But no matter where you end up or the challenges you encounter, if you are truly wanting to pursue a field of medicine, your passion to serve others will help you overcome these hurdles, and it will all be okay. You just gotta, during those hard times, remember why you're here and why you're doing it, and I think everything will work out for you.
And with that, we end another episode of Carroll PMC's video interview series and wrap up another story for you guys. And in this discussion, we covered so many different topics. So many topics that, quite frankly, I was finding it difficult to both internalize all of the information as well as continue to have a coherent interview with Trevor. But I think in the latter half of our discussion, we really touched on a lot of sensitive but purely realistic topics as far as what can happen in the process of applying to medical school and becoming a physician. And I think a very important lesson can be taken from this. A lesson that states that what will define us as doctors is not how we handle our successes, but how we handle our failures and how we learn from them and how we grow from them. And learning from my failures is what cemented me on this road to becoming a physician and is without a doubt the greatest contributor to my drive to never take an exit, to never make a U-turn off of this path. And that's not to say that, to continue this crappy analogy on further, that's not to say that a rest stop isn't warranted every once in a while. That's not to say that that doesn't hurt the process. But as I in particular face the multiple adcoms of the medical schools that I have applied to in the coming weeks and their decisions regarding my application, I take comfort in knowing that my plan B, my plan C, my plan D, my plan E, my plan F, all the way to plan Z, all of those plans are detours that lead back to plan A, which is becoming a physician. And I think Trevor and me share in common that our failures, although much different than each other's, only have made us realize how much we want to become physicians, have only made us realize our desires for becoming physicians even more than ever before. And I would be willing to bet that the same may be said for all of you who accept your failures and begin to reorient yourselves back towards success, whatever that may mean to you. Thank you for taking the time to listen and or watch me today. Hopefully this guide has helped you gain some motivation or insight into what it takes to being a successful pre-medical student. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to your Carroll PMC officers, schedule an office hour slot with me on Moodle, or consult with Carroll faculty. Trevor also wanted it to be known that his email address is available upon you emailing me first for any questions regarding the HPSP Scholarship or more about his pathway or what steps you could take to pursue success on your pathway. If you like this content, please like the video and subscribe to our channel, and share the video to your friends who are facing the same demons and gaining the same successes on your road to becoming a physician. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time.